When I started at CRWA back in 1990, the river was basically an open sewer about half the time. And I was the only employee. But by 1995, I'd hired a couple of civil engineers, a hydrologist, a couple of scientists, biologists. We ran our own chemistry lab for water chemistry because I couldn't get commercial labs to do what I wanted. And so we started to actually research and study the entire river to try to figure out how it worked. One of the things we learned, especially through the later portion of the 90s and from then till now, is that our climate is changing. Imagine that. And in the change, we're getting longer periods of drought, followed by all of the rain that would have fallen during those periods all at once. It's happened in California, 23 years, and they get 900 inches of snowfall last year and catastrophic flooding. This is what the Charles has looked like and will continue to look like well into the future, and we need to start to prepare. The other thing is, once we got the sewage out of the river in 2000, 2001 or so, and sunlight started to penetrate into the river, we started to get this stuff. This gunk we refer to as blue-green algae, but what it really is, photosynthetic cyanobacteria. And if you see it, stay away. We don't want it. So we started to figure out with EPA and the State Department of Environmental Protection where this stuff comes from. And we found out a number of things. That first of all, the flooding and stormwater runoff and the cyanobacteria are all related. First thing we did was we divided up the 308 square miles of the river into its predominant land uses. And here they are. And I want you to pay careful attention to the area of 3 that's identified in black there in the pie chart. Had you asked me in 2003 when we started this study, where does the phosphorus that causes cyanobacteria come from, I would have told you fertilizers from agriculture, medium and low density lawns with a lot of fertilizer, agricultural uses, you get the drift, failed septic systems. And the great thing about science is you get to figure out when you're dead wrong. 55% of the phosphate load in the Charles River comes from commercial, industrial, and institutional high-density residential properties, which share in common big parking lots, where 100% of what runs off them ends up in the river and causes problems. And guess what? There's tons of phosphorus in that stuff that runs off. And if the river has, as it does, 2.14, isn't science great, 2.14? 2.14 times as much phosphorus in it as it can handle. If we don't do something about these sources of phosphorus, the river will never become stable. It will always be eutrophic or dying. So we worked with the Environmental Protection Agency to begin to regulate the commercial, industrial, and institutional properties, and that regulation came out in draft about a month ago. What it does is it requires the 6,000 or so properties in these 3 watersheds, the urban watersheds of Boston Harbor, to reduce the phosphate content in their stormwater runoff by 60 to 65%, depending on the watershed. Turns out, doing that is pretty expensive. A pound of phosphorus exists in something like 650,000 to 1 million gallons of water. So if you're going to end this phosphate loading in the Charles River, you have to capture and infiltrate 650,000 to 1 million gallons of water because the phosphates adsorb or chemically bond with the soil, and you keep the water or keep the phosphorus out of the river. The cost in urban Boston is $200,000 to $300,000 a pound to fix the problem. If you live in one of the suburban areas around Boston, the cost is about half that, $100,000 to $150,000 a pound. And I'm sure you're all excited to go out and spend $150,000 to $200,000 to $300,000 to eliminate a pound of phosphorus, right? The thing is we've managed to construct a climate box, and we need to extricate ourselves from that climate box. Effectively, the infrastructure that we've created over the last 200 years, which is based on 19th century technology, can't handle this stuff. And we need to learn how to. So we've created a new technique. It turns out that if I own a little open space and I can figure out where former tributaries and former wetlands used to exist in urban, suburban Boston, we didn't when we buried all those things with a bulldozer so we could build the next 65-story building, right? We didn't take the soils, the hydric soils of wetlands, and the sand and gravel of tributaries and the like. We didn't remove those soils and send them to Utah. They're still there. They're just buried. We can restore them. And it turns out that fixing those natural systems is both cheaper and more valuable to us than trying to deal with phosphates everywhere they are. So the deal is, if I can fix tributaries and store phosphorus, and I can do that at, say, $100,000 for potential of 18 pounds, I can turn around and sell credits to those properties where they're looking at $200,000 to $300,000 a pound. The deal is to reduce the cost of compliance at the same time that we begin to restore the environmental natural systems on which we used to depend and which over the last 200 years we've done a great job of destroying. We call this Blue Cities Exchange. What it will do is allow property owners to go online without hiring a lawyer, without hiring an engineer, find their property, find what kind of soils they're sitting on, find out what their cost of compliance would be, and if it's too expensive, they can look at credit trading, where what they're doing is funding the restoration of natural systems. The way out of the box that we're in is restoring nature. Kind of looks like this. This is an actual parking lot at Northeastern University. If you looked at our mapping technology called Stratifix, you'd discover that parking lot can look like this. Which one would you rather spend time at? Not a very tough question, is it? And the other thing we can do is we can look beyond just the stream itself, but the soils that used to infiltrate water, capture phosphorus, and allow that water to move through the ground and come up as in-stream flow. So this is an area that would feed that creek you just looked at, and this is what we would like it to look at. Again, we're selling credits, we're paying for this, we're reducing, by the way, for the people paying for this, we're reducing flooding consequences and therefore flood insurance costs. We're reducing heat island impacts. We're reducing the pollution. We're reducing the heat in the river because we're getting more water in the ground coming out of the ground. And colder water carries more oxygen, so we're beginning to restore habitat. You follow this? There's this long cascade of benefits in restoring the systems we destroyed. And the other element of this is that when we destroyed that system, all of those impacts are closely related. We can't just solve for phosphorus. We have to solve for groundwater. We have to solve for oxygen in the river. So this is how it's done. This is over on Mission Hill and the Northeastern campus. The pink line on the left there is called the Stony Brook Conduit. So we took, on the right, you'll see a map from about 1840 that shows how this area used to work when nature was the dominant player. But we did a really good job with our bulldozers and made her go away, and now we want to bring her back. So the idea would be to think about how we restore that system, because remember, the soils are still there. The hydric soils are still there. There's every opportunity for us to do this. And it looks kind of like this. Remember that sinewy line that used to be the Stony Brook Creek. We're going to bring that back. We're going to have it spin around the Whittier Housing Street project and head out to the Muddy River. And in the process, we're going to sell credits for the riparian corridor and select wetlands that we restore. You with me here? This is what the restored creek looks like. It's going to go around the buildings. We're not going to ask Bostonians to move. They can stay here. We're just going to add a new feature to where they live that will protect them from flooding. It helps create the conveyance to get the water out of town, and we can restore wetlands in this area. By the way, wetlands store 4 to 10 times more carbon than forests and forest soils combined. So the idea would be to restore those wetland storage areas, not only for phosphorus, but also for carbon sequestration in the area where we generate the most carbon. The other nice thing about this is we're creating the potential for jobs that robots aren't going to do. Rebuilding creeks, rebuilding wetlands, and then maintaining those wetlands over time are going to involve a lot of human beings with good paying jobs who come back every year and ensure that the natural systems that we restore remain natural systems. This is the long list, or actually it's the beginning of the long list, of what we call resilience training benefits. First is the cost of compliance goes down with the new regulation. There is flood resilience. Significant flood resilience. We made 26 creeks in Boston go away. Think about that for a minute. So when it rains, where does the water go? It hangs around, they have a flood party because they got no place to go, those raindrops. You reduce combined sewer overflows. So combined sewer overflows, where the storm drain and the sewer are in the same pipe, are activated when there's too much water in them. But if you keep the water out of the pipes in the first place, you don't have combined sewer overflows. There's tremendous drought resilience here. Heat island mitigation, nutrient and pollution removal. There's groundwater replenishment, which is key in Boston. The other thing is you get reduced temperatures, greater oxygen, and since we share the planet, habitat restoration is kind of key. Resilience trading. Oh, by the way, this guy's name is Walter. He kind of likes it around here since we got the sewage out of the Charles. The bottom line is, if we continue to play this 19th century game, and basically what we do is repair, replace, and expand the infrastructure systems that put us in the situation we find ourselves in, expecting a different outcome, good luck. Einstein's theory of insanity. We need to fundamentally change the way we think about living on the land and the way we live on the land. And we believe that this approach, which incentivizes the restoration of natural systems, can go a long way to beginning to save us. Thank you.